Haunted trail / house workers of Reddit, what's the craziest thing you've seen / heard on the job? Worked in a haunted attraction for 5 years and one comes to mind. I played a stereotypical crazy doctor in a scene with other actors. The basic layout is you would enter the hospital, get on an elevator, fake, go down a toxic hallway, and finally meet me. The walls were thin and made of plywood. I remember one night, group walks in already screaming. I think awesome, easy scare and easy group. They step in the elevator and lose it. I hear them run out the elevator and toward the hall. I get ready in my normal position. I would stand behind the door to my office and scare people out of the scene. This didn't happen. This group crashes through the wall. I scream like a little girl, which scares them more. They run through another wall. At this point, I just want them out to get my scene back in order. But then another actor from another scene shows up at the exit with a chainsaw. The groups run through their makeshift doors back through my scene. We had to then scare them back through the scene to get them to move on. People were banned from bringing chainsaws in my scene after that. I remember one year my friend and I went to an outdoor haunted attraction. At the end, guys with chainsaws start to chase you on the trail until you reach the end. While we were running, another guy popped out of nowhere and scared the shit out of us. We were so scared we started running in completely different directions and had no idea where we were going because it was so dark. The guys eventually had to put down their chainsaws and lead us to the right direction. Lol, it was kind of embarrassing. I was on a hayride haunted trail thing once. The tractor pulling the trailer stalled and chainsaw guy caught up to us. Wasn't supposed to happen. He got very close, tripped, and the chainsaw hit an older guy, sitting on the edge of the trailer, square on the face, and it broke his nose. Obviously no chain on the chainsaw, but there was still a lot of blood. Everyone lost their shit when they saw the blood, even the chainsaw guy and the guy driving the tractor. All us kids were terrified. Hilarious when I think about it now, haha. They rented / borrowed a new automatic tractor for all the years after that. No lawsuits or anything. I worked a haunted house in college. I was one of the people who hid behind things and jumped out right after the lights came on, so people were light blind and startled. This one time a kid was walking through with his mom, and I heard him whisper something. She said okay sweetie and just took his pants and underwear off in the middle of his maze-like warehouse haunted house and dropped them in a corner, pulled out another pair and helped him put it on. Continued along the path, leaving the pants in the corner. He shit his pants and she just left them there. I used to work at a haunted house. It was relatively small and only had maybe 100 or so visitors a night. An old man was screaming and lost his dentures. We had to turn on all of the lights to help him find it. It was a funny sight seeing 20 employees dressed as various monsters and ghosts looking for his dentures. An 8-year kid shit himself. It was so bad that the entire building stunk. After about an hour or so, we had to put a closed for maintenance sign up so we can eradicate the smell. The kid not other shat himself, but it was diarrhea. There was a liquid poop trail that traveled through 75% of the haunted house. We have strobe lights towards the end of our building with a mirror maze. It's honestly really easy to navigate, but the darkness plus strobe plus mirrors makes it a little disorienting. A guy started to panic and tried kicking through the mirrors in a desperate attempt to escape. He cut his leg all up and had to go to the hospital for treatments. That was a hefty bill for our insurance company. Not exactly crazy or anything, but the only time I've actually been able to contribute to an AskReddit. I worked at the Markoff's Haunted Forest in Maryland, which is widely regarded as one of the best haunted attractions on the East Coast. It has 2 paths that go winding through the forest filled with different scenes and props ranging from church basements, to a creepy monkey village, to just narrow pitch black tunnels you navigate by feel. I was in the church basement scene this night and I had a sweet spot where none of the lights touched, making it pitch black. People would walk up to me suspicious that someone would be there, but it really was pitch black. They would feel reassured because they were so close they would have to see someone if they were there, but nope, it's me. Tons of great scares. The trails are always busy from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., but this night there was a strange gap of no people for roughly 30 minutes. That never happens. Finally a family came along, 2 teen girls and their parents. I got these girls good. Real good. Like I could see the imminent death in their eyes good. Then after they passed it was another 30 minutes pause of people only to have the normal flow of people return. Later on we found out that it was the Obama girls going through the trails with Secret Service acting as their parents. No one was told ahead of time for security reasons obviously, and we only learned after the fact. The gaps of people were to allow them to slip in and enjoy the trail without anyone else having the opportunity to realize who they were and interrupt them, so I got to scare the hell out of the Obama girls. That was cool. I worked at Halloween Horror Nights for a few years. Craziest thing I ever seen were the people who wanted to fight the haunted house actors. I'm talking full on "oh you think you bad?" while taking swings at them, and it happened almost every night. It's like, why? Also lol at the dude who sparked up a doob in the house. I don't understand people. You're going into a haunted house, you know all the people inside are just actors in costumes, you're expecting to either be scared or to laugh in the face of danger. Why do you then decide to start trying to beat up the actors? I understand maybe the fight or flight response is partly responsible, but why do people think it's okay to go to these places and start threatening the people who work there? They aren't really mad scientists and chainsaw-wielding maniacs, you don't really have to beat them up to save yourself. I work as a maze attendant at a very big theme park haunt in the Midwest. We've only been open for 4 weekends and I've already seen a kid who thought farting into a fog machine was a good idea, a drunk guy who grabbed an actor and licked them, we had to chase him out of the park, people who breathe in the fake fog thinking it'll get them high. I've been trampled at least once a night by terrified teenagers, people who try to scare the actors, let me tell you, that never ends well, people who punch the actors have whistles they blow when that happens and it scares the living shit out of whoever's punching them, obnoxious 10-year-olds who try to get the actors to dab, this one girl who got so scared she started to tickle the actor, to name a few. I went to Haunt Not Scary Farm last week. I'm never really scared, but I used to go every year to appreciate the costume and set designs. We went into one of the new mazes and the whole beginning is filled with fog. I had my hand on my friend's shoulder so I didn't run into any of the walls or actors, and just as I was going to take a deep breath, the fog machine went up and my face was right in front of it. I started having a coughing fit because of it, and one of the actors popped out and put a hand on my shoulder and said in my ear that the air was clear just a few more feet ahead. Lol. The problem is those unfortunate things always happen to me. Worst thing I witnessed while working in one, aside from the typical piss/shit/vomit, was this one time towards the end of our run. We would go for about 4 to 5 hours a night if it was busy. Reset times in between groups was exhausting. Some really horrible kids came through kicking the sets and props and trying to hit some of the actors. One of the girls, B, had her own room in which she sat in a really dark corner on a metal barrel. She would normally scare people by rattling it or knocking a stick against it to get their attention, but in doing this one time, these kids ran over to her and started laughing and trying to choke her out. We only found out about it because the next group that followed these kids found B passed out on the floor. Security grabbed those F-seekers and the police came and took them away. Not sure what happened to them, but B ended up having to go to hospital and didn't return for the rest of the season, which was sad, because despite her scare being very simple, it was so good at getting people moving through the corridor. It was a shit night. When I worked at a haunted house, I was put in a scene with one of my good friends and my twin sister. They decided to put us in a dollhouse with lots of mangled porcelain dolls and stuffed animals with their body parts missing. My good friend is a very small girl and she could fit into the smallest of places. There was this grandfather clock that we had in the first room, and she would remove the pendulum and hide in there while we shouted at patrons to play hide and seek with us. She would scare so many people with that spot, it was unreal. We also played the twin thing off as much as possible, both me and my sister being small as well. I would hide behind a small dresser and get a jump scare as soon as a group came through. Right after my scare, my twin would get them from the other side of the room and we would come together like the twins from The Shining. You wouldn't believe how many people are scared of little kids. I had a blast making people fall on their asses while also mind-blowing them with the twin thing. All fun times. Oh, I'm sure I'm somebody's pathetic story. I love being scared but hate clowns. I was dragged into a clown maze at Knott's and just quietly dug my head into my husband's back and never looked up. We got to the end and I could see outside, so I thought we were done. With my hand still on the hood of his jacket, I drop my arms and lift my head up. At that exact moment a massive clown pops up right in my face, so, while trying to throw my head back down, I accidentally elbow him, hard, in the face. I then hear 3 more and tear ass through the exit. Security grabbed me and the actor came out. I apologized that it was an accident, but standing there talking with the clown, I started bawling and couldn't look at him. Security was laughing hysterically and the poor kid actually felt bad that he was still scaring me, sobbing. It was an "I'm sorry I can't look at you, I didn't mean to," sobbing. It was an excited "Oh my god I hate clowns, I'm sorry." He was sweet and security got a big kick out of it. Not my finest moment. People get punched in the face all the time. Seriously, if you react to being scared by punching someone, don't go to a haunted house. I spent 4 years at a haunted house, so here is my highlight reel. Woman went into labor inside the haunt. Water broke and all. Actor tried to scare his mom. Mom freaked out not recognizing her son, ended up breaking his arm. Multiple seizures. Lots of people pee/shit themselves. Sometimes you get lucky and someone pukes. Grand finale. I was working the front lines when the owner came running up to me telling me to call 911. His exact words were, "Some dude just busted a nut in the line." Or more accurately, ruptured. Some kid had a pre-existing condition that caused his testicle to explode while waiting to get into the haunt. Customers that overheard that conversation had a lot of questions. I didn't see anything too crazy, but there was a running bet regarding people pissing or shitting themselves. If you could get someone to pee their pants, you got a drink from everyone in your scene. And if someone shit their pants because of you, you get free drinks for the season. We went out after work most weekends. While I worked there, we only had one patron shit in my scene, and it was pretty dramatic. A young woman just started sprinting out of the scene. I stopped her, and she yelled, "I need a bathroom." I once worked as the sound/video monitor technician for a popular haunted house in Houston, Texas. My primary duty was to keep an eye on the camera screens, for security and liability purposes, as well as adjusting the sound makers and music volume and content, when needed. I remember one night a long time ago, we had group of women on a bachelorette party walk through the first room of the haunted house. As I was monitoring the cameras when they walked in, I noticed that one of the women in particular, the woman who was getting married, was clearly drunk at the time and appeared to be the most frightened of all the women as they all creeped their way into the dark room. She was, literally, holding her breasts as she slowly proceeded through the room in the dark, apparently to ease her reaction to anything that pops out at her. Since our cameras having night vision capable lens, I could see everything clear as day. Then, once the first scene commenced, a first monster popped out around the corner dressed as a crazy doctor with a knife. The bride-to-be was so ridiculously terrified that she began convulsing for a few seconds and then decided to powerfully tackle the co-worker of mine, let's call him Jeff, against a brick wall so hard that it knocked the wind out of him. Somehow her shirt got ripped and her breasts were literally hanging out. Jeff was on the ground at this point struggling to breath. She then pulled out a taser gun she had on her, which we have no idea how she got in with, and proceeded to fire the taser directly at Jeff's chest, rendering him completely unconscious. I then immediately stopped everything. I shut off all the background music, the fog/mist, turned on all the lights, and got onto the intercom speaker system and said with a very stern voice, "Exit the facility now, you guys are done. Security will be waiting for you outside." She and her friends began crying drunkenly and uncontrollably. Our site manager was on the scene within seconds of hearing my voice over the speaker system. He checked on Jeff, who was unconscious, and told the women to exit to the nearest door immediately and that charges would be pressed against them for this. We then had to contact the police and get them involved because Jeff almost had to go to the hospital. Not only did our business press charges against the woman and her friends, but Jeff also pressed charges for assault and battery. That was one hell of a night. We lost a lot of business that night because of this incident. Disclaimer, I'm practicing my writing skills, so this story wasn't true. But it captured your attention, didn't it? This may not exactly fit Op's request, but where else can I post this story? When I was a teenager, my younger brothers and I decided to set up our front walkway with some scare the trick-or-treaters props. First, the setup. Our house had a front walkway that was bordered by the wall of the house on the left, and a rickety wooden fence with a gate on the right. The carport was on the other side of the wooden fence. The front door faced the carport and was directly across from the gate. Basically, you had to walk through a narrow hallway to get to the front door on the left, or through the gate to the carport on the right. My brothers hauled a record player onto the roof and had an album of spooky sounds that they put on. This was in 1975 or so, and we were poor, so we didn't even have speakers. Just the loud, tinny sound of a portable turntable. We made a human figure of stuffed clothing and hung it by the neck from the rafters of the walkway. Brother Bob rigged little red lights for eyes. Brother David built a coffin and placed it on the side of the house in the walkway. He dressed himself as Dracula and took his place in the coffin. Bob dressed himself as some sort of monster and then draped chains all over his chest and the gate, essentially chaining himself to the fence. I dressed as a witch and waited at the door to pass out candy. The overall effect from the street wasn't too intimidating, just the music and the dead hanging body. The plan was to scare the bejesus out of the kids after they passed the entrance, and scare them we did. Now, remember this is 1975. Parents stood at the sidewalk if there were parents in attendance at all. These brave little kids walked up our sidewalk with both eyes fixed on the dead body. Once they got past that horror, they were now in the walkway when David would sit up in his coffin, scaring them into running toward the front door. Once there they never even saw Bob until he lunged at them, the chains holding him back. I would open the door, cackling like the witch I am, to give them candy. However, the poor traumatized kids would blast into the house screaming and crying. Not a one of them would agree to go back out the front door, or come near me, either, so my mother had to escort them through the kitchen and out into the carport so they could run screaming into their parents' arms. We were a success. Every kid in our neighborhood probably had nightmares about us that night. We never did it again though. It was a one-night show. But, our legend lived on. From 1975 until they sold the house in 1988, my parents never had a single trick-or-treater again. Mom would stand at the door with her little bags of candy and hear the kids screaming at their parents to run past the house. Nobody came to the door. Nobody ever again. Worked at a haunt for 5 years. Had to quit after my last year cause of 2 incidences that I caused on accident. Before the stories I need to paint a picture. I'm 6 feet 4 inches and close to 400 pounds with a 2-foot-tall mohawk at the time. First incident, a co-worker was traveling through the house using pop doors to get through quicker to their room. I heard them coming and figured I would try to scare them. They come in my hallway and I popped my head around the corner at them. He reaches for the wall as his whole body goes stiff and he falls flat on his face, breaking his nose and going into a seizure. Later found out that he stopped taking his meds, so I didn't feel as bad as I did when it happened. The second one was the last scare in a haunt that I ever did. An older gentleman and his granddaughter were making their way to my hallway. I stood in the middle of the hallway so they could see me in the strobe light, then jumped in my pop door to scare them. I pop out and they both stumble backwards into a corner, so I pinned them in the corner with my arms, yelling that they will never leave because I'm going to eat them alive. The man's eyes stared at me and slowly opened wider and wider before his eyes rolled into the back of his head as he slid limp down to the floor in the corner. I drop the act and grab his hand, asking if he is okay, and he doesn't respond. I yell for help and that we had a party down. The house owner and makeup artist come flying into the hallway telling me to get back. They call 911 and they get there a few minutes later. The EMTs tell us that he is having a heart attack as they get him on the stretcher. At that point I walked to the back room and sat down with a bottle of water and started to cry. I felt so bad that I took off my costume and left and never went back. Found out from a friend that the man came back a few weeks later to talk to me. He told them he felt bad that I quit and that out of all the haunted houses he had went to, it was me that got him the best and he loved it. I still feel bad for both of those incidents almost 19 years later. I worked a haunt 1 year and was set up in a butcher room. I had a pig mask and a table saw. No one cared where the saw sound was coming from, just that it was loud and scary. But the best part was the guy missing part of his arm working my room. He had lost a portion of his arm right below the elbow, still had his elbow, and about 2 inches of forearm. He'd sit on the floor, and prop a fake severed arm near his stump, and pretend to be cutting through his arm with a knife. Attendees could hear almost there, as they walked into the room. Once he grabbed the fake arm with his good hand, and started waving the stump, I'd see full-grown men push their girlfriends and wives away and run at full speed. It was hilarious. I used to do a lot of haunted house work, woods walks and stuff like that, but I also had the privilege of doing set design, makeup/prosthetic work, and acting in a large haunted house set in an abandoned factory. The place was actually haunted, so we had some really weird shit go on, noises from parts that we didn't use, things being moved, stuff like that. Ghost hunters from the area still do overnight stays there sometimes. In terms of normal crazy, lots of drunk people trying to fuck with the actors, climbing on props, etc. The incident that takes the cake happened at the factory haunt. We had a sort of dress rehearsal night where we let the families of our crew come through. The father of some poor kid threw a block of wood at this pregnant girl who was acting for us. After he finished the tour he left and didn't come back to pick the kid up. That was very sad, but I was happy that our haunt was a constructive escape for him. In 6th grade, our elementary school did a haunted house fundraiser. It wasn't anything big. They set up a maze in one of the classrooms and has a bunch of decorations and people popping out of places to scare everyone. It was actually pretty well put together and scary. I volunteered to work because I love to scare people. Anyways, my job was to monitor the maze and help anyone or fix stuff. I brought my werewolf mask and I would stand still like a statue and tap on people's shoulders when they turned around or jump at them if I had the chance. There was this dad walking his young son through, and it was obvious he was terrified. His dad was comforting him by saying that it was fake and he shouldn't be worried. I didn't want to scare him, so I just stood still. His dad then pointed me and said, "Look, the werewolf is fake too," and then to show how fake I was, he smacked my mask. It wasn't hard and didn't hurt, but my mask and glasses came right off. He apologized left and right saying he didn't know I was real. I wasn't mad or anything, I just thought it was hilarious that I actually looked like a prop. Honestly, a lot of the time I was the head of haunt, so the scary zombie sitting there being like, "Hey guys, do not touch the ghouls and they will not touch you," and other rules. It was pretty uneventful, but there would be little middle school punks trying to get me to break character. It was fun to mess with them. Oh, I guess one of the really cool things was that in my portion of the park there's a big fountain. It gets lighted up and a female actor every year puts on like 5 layers of pants and galoshes and she sits in there all night being spooky standing in the water. It's pretty impressive because in October it's freezing there. I was volunteering at a haunted trail when I was 12 because we had an assignment that entailed doing community service for school. Hearing this, I thought the best thing I could do was working for free as a zombie. What could be better? So the night rolls around and I'm fitted with my zombie costume. We walk out into the woods where I'm led to my coffin behind a chain that separates the trail from the path that folks walk on through the forest. When the tour guide would show up with a new group of people, they would wave a flashlight near me as my cue for me to pop out of the coffin and hit a fake dismembered leg against the side. Night starts, a few groups go by and I'm feeling pretty good about the whole thing. About halfway through the night, I see the flashlight and do my usual routine. A little kid shrieks and for God only knows what reason. The kid's dad looks at his son, looks at me and starts sprinting at me. He clears the chain easily, runs right up to me, pulls me up out of the coffin with his bare hands, puts his finger in my face and says, "Cut it out, you little shit." He then walks back to his son, consoling him, and they walk back through the trail. I was flabbergasted and I just left the trail right then and there, walking past groups in full zombie attire. I then walked home, took off everything and just sat stunned in my bathroom trying to make sense of everything / not cry. To this day, I still have absolutely no idea why a guy would take his 5-year-old kid into a haunted trail and start physically roughing up the ghosts and goblins working in there. I don't know what happened with that father and son, but the attraction after me was a guy dressed as Leatherface, running out of the forest with a real chainsaw. Can only imagine. My sister worked at a haunted house one year, when my twin brothers were 13 and the little one was 11. I was 20. The twins invited a couple of girls from school to go with us, with the hopes that they would get some clingy scared girls on their arms. I was taller. They clung to me, a woman. The twins were not pleased. The last scene was the one our sister was in. She's built like a linebacker, and the littlest brother was teeny. So, we're on a bridge through a black tunnel, with the walls splattered with black light paint, and actors in paint-splattered black morph suits start edging towards us. Freaky shit. Sister is one of them, and she leans over the railing and grabs our youngest brother and drags him off into the scene. The two girls flip shit and bolt. We find them outside, sobbing on one of the security guards that this kid got eaten by a set piece. Then the little one comes around the corner. The girls start fawning all over him, making sure he has all of his limbs, and he's looking directly at the twins with the biggest shit-eating grin I have ever witnessed. I was never so proud of my siblings. I used to work at a popular Halloween attraction called the Slaughterhouse. If you're in Arizona, you've probably heard of it. Technically I was a volunteer, but they donated money to my school if we worked, so it counts to me. I was working there before it was all set up as a Halloween attraction. At the time it was just an empty abandoned slaughterhouse that people used to have raves in. And even without all the spooky shit put up and people running around in straitjackets, that place is so creepy. My classmates and I were charged with cleaning that place up, and we found some weird shit in there. Firstly, we had to clean off the roof balcony. It was covered in mummified dead cats. I have no clue why there was so many dead cats up there, but it was very chilling. On the second floor, there was a chapel. I'm not really sure why a slaughterhouse needed a chapel, but there was one in there. That room was absolutely horrifying. It was uncomfortably dark in there, and the moment you crossed the threshold of the door you immediately felt freezing. I went in there once alone and I could see my breath. We ended up leaving it be because no one wanted to go in there. We just left the pews be. During the actual haunts, there was a lot of mishaps that had never happened before. And I worked the haunt when it was at different locations. Nothing like this shit ever happened before. One part of the haunt has a room called the plexiglass room. This shit was sturdy. It was basically a huge thick window and people in straitjackets stood behind it and screamed, threw themselves at it, and threw various shit in the room, chairs, barrels, etc., at it as people walked past. I literally hit that thing with a hammer before and it was completely fine. Well, the first day we open, one of the actors throws a plastic jug at that plexiglass and it shatters all over a bunch of people walking through, and we have to shut down that part of the haunt and clean it all up. The next thing that happened maybe a week later. A group of girls are walking through the haunt and everything is fine and they're finishing it up. At the exit there's no actors, so as not to scare people and make them fall down the stairs. Well, something spooks this girl and she books it out of the haunt, trips, and falls over the railing and lands on her neck. We have to shut down the haunt again, and I think she may have broken her neck. I don't know, we didn't get any info after an ambulance took her away. Then there was just various parts of the set falling over, actors getting injured, a bee flew up my nose while I was working, and actors getting scared shitless. I'm 100% sure that place is haunted or cursed or something. There's been quite a few deaths there. Back when it was an actual slaughterhouse, an employee slipped on the old lift in the building, fell off, and the lift crushed him. My boyfriend's father is a paramedic. I won't go back in there, even to enjoy the haunts. That place is creepy. I'm so late, but I can finally answer this. I've seen a lot of crazy things and people. One of my favorites is just really sweet. I was playing a victim character and this woman refused to leave my side. I was crying and she stopped and stood next to me, even tried to hold my hand, haha. Her son had to make her leave the room. It made my night. Worked at a haunted house a few years during high school. To get a mental image, to get to where I was you went through the house, a ton of rooms made of plywood, walk outside to a kind of hall, around two corners to where my friend was hiding, turn, there I was hiding in a church, and around another corner to where my other friend was hiding with a chainsaw. A few stories. Had an older lady, 50s 60s, walk past me and she goes, in the most upbeat voice, I got so scared in there I almost farted. To her friend. I had to take a minute. There was some teenager guy going through, trying to be the cool kid, acting like a badass in front of his friends. Harassing monsters, trying to touch us, act. The owner of the maze came through and grabbed this kid by his arm, and growls, "If you touch my monsters, I'll let them touch you." Then he points at me in my zombie outfit. I bit down on the blood capsule in NY mouth and grint. This kid pissed himself and ran. One slow night around midnight we heard a group coming through the house. Now at the end of the hall outside the house, was a guy dressed as a scarecrow with a shovel. He was supposed to become animated and scare people, whatever. Anyway, he had fallen asleep leaning on his shovel, and when the group went by, he fell right in front of them, and scared the crap out of them. I miss working haunted houses. Lol. One time when I was a teenager, I took my little sister to a haunted house. This demon dude tried to scare us as we passed his dark corner by slamming his wooden staff on the floor, only he missed and hit his foot. He immediately started howling in pain, but I wasn't sure if he was still acting or actually hurt himself, so I just stared at him for like 30 seconds. I ended up asking a chainsaw-wielding clown for help. He had to go get a golf cart, which I helped him load his demon buddy into. Turns out good old Beelzebub managed to break his own foot. I don't know if it was necessarily scary, but I was quite alarmed. Not a worker, but when I went through the Walking Dead horror house at Universal Studios, my mother threw me at the first zombie she saw and booked it. I was dressed as this mental patient at a Six Flags. and this group came in. Two older guys who acted like big brothers, and one small girl. She looked about 7. Anyway, she was a mess, but when she walked in she was just calm. And I distinctly remember how she just stared at me. Creepy little girl. I didn't work at one, but I might end up as a comment on here. Last year so, and I went to a haunted house where the actors could separate you and not touch but get close. I got separated from my group and cornered by 3 dudes dressed like redneck murderers, and in my blind panic to run I kneed one in the balls. I apologized immediately, I felt so bad. I worked a trail for about 9 years in several different roles. There are a ton of scares, but one of my favorite times was actually a person not afraid at all. I was in the clown hut and kinda had a lot of freedom as to what I did. This group is coming and I got in position to swing down from a rafter upside down and scream or laugh or something, so I popped down and I'm eye to eye with them but upside down. The dad, mom, brother and his friend all run backwards out of the hut, but the younger sister, who can't be more than 7, just stares at me blankly and goes, "You didn't scare me." Made my night hot. Toughest one in the family was the little girl. I used to work in a haunted house. I was made up to look like a corpse in what looked like a locked cage style grave, but the chain was layered so it didn't actually connect the door to the side. I was dressed in a winding sheet spattered with fake blood, with a wig disguising my hair, which also shielded my eyes, so I could see when people came close, and FX makeup covering any exposed skin, so I looked like a dressed up mannequin. I am very, very good at being still. People would get right up to where my hand was sticking out of the bars, jumping and shrieking when I sat up and reached for them. But the real fun started when that cage swung open. People would freak out then. One guy in particular, this big, burly dude, was right up beside the door when I reached up and swung it open, and as soon as he figured out I could, in fact, get out of my cage and come for him, he let out a scream and ran so fast he went through one of our temporary walls like something out of a cartoon. My school puts on a haunted house to raise money for the music department, and one of our main rule is touch nothing and it won't touch you. Last year, a grown man came into our haunted house and started punching a bunch of high schoolers. It did not end well. My job was to do the final scare at the exit to the trail. There was an old Ford tractor outside that appeared to be just decor, but I had it rigged to fire up remotely and run at full throttle with no mufflers. It was loud. The rear end was also blocked up, so the tires would be spinning. I would only save this scare for shithead kids, as the noise of this thing would tip people off going inside. So I'm sitting there, and these 3 teen boys started bad-mouthing the trail. Well, it was lame. Rip off, etc. After being tough guys to Mr. Chainsaw. I hit the button. Instantly, the 3 punks are staring into the brights of a maniacal tractor. One freezes like a deer. Despite the trail exiting to an open field, one darts into the heavy brush, the other one turns around, and does a full sprint into some haphazardly arranged boards nailed to some trees to outline the exit. His face smacked into the top board and exploded in blood. Had to call paramedics, and canceled the haunted trail permanently out of fear of being sued. I used to be a manager at a haunted house. The owner of the haunted house came up with exactly 2 scares guaranteed to work on even the manliest of men. One was a jump scare and the other was a psychological scare. 1. Headlights and bumper of a car on a pushcart that came out of nowhere and would honk at you. 2. A completely ordinary guy, with a third pant leg front/center filled with a semi-rigid material, who would do nothing else but talk to you and hit on your girlfriend. Worked at a haunted hayride for 4 to 5 years. You usually try to scare 3 types of people: kids, girls, old people, as they usually give the better responses and make the job fun. This one night an old lady was hunched over in the wagon and I went to scare her. I climbed in the wagon and got in her face. Before I can make a monster sound, she says, "I'm ready for you, big boy." Grabs the back of my mask and shoves my face in her chest. She had to be at least 75 to 80. I was working in the butcher's room on opening night. I was in a cage, and one of my friends was on the butcher's table. Just a few groups in and it looked like my friend had really got into her role. She was thrashing about like she was getting cut up, but it wasn't acting. Turns out she was epileptic and the strobe lights had given her a seizure. We didn't realize it until the group had left and she didn't stop. Luckily the butcher that night was a sheriff's deputy. He quickly pulled her tongue from her throat before we rushed her out. Also an EMT was working in the house that night. They tended to her until the ambulance got there. That one group got one hell of a show. I worked for a haunted attraction last year and it was great for the most part, aside from drunk customers. My role was to be trapped in a cage, and once the customer would walk around to the other side, I would crawl out and chase them into the next room. A rather drunk woman much larger than myself decided that it would be funny to grab me tightly by the neck, choke me, and shake me around. Needless to say, it upset me quite a bit and I needed to be excused for a while during that night. Didn't work there, but I probably would have been someone's story here. I don't like being scared. I don't watch scary movies and I always sleep with the lights on. However, a few friends were in town visiting me last year and they wanted to go to a haunted house. I figured if I took a couple of Xanax that I'd be alright. It was a 7 Deadly Sins themed haunted house, really elaborate and well done. My friends were all adequately scared, and I was so messed up that nothing could faze me. It seemed like everything was going great until we got to the lust room. They had a dominatrix there with some guy chained to the bed screaming for help, bloody and whatnot. She kept threatening to hurt people there while cracking her whip. I don't remember how exactly it went down because Xanax, but she said something and I tried to make out with her. It didn't end well. My friends and I got kicked out and had to take a special exit out of the haunted house. I got beat up by some of the employees there before being forcibly removed, but I was still too messed up to care. Nothing too crazy in the one I worked in. I had a group of girls come through my section once and when I jumped out to scare them they all just froze. I then jumped up on the rail between them and me and they just went down like dominoes and started trying to crawl over each other. My favorite was in this dark hallway. I had a spot in the ceiling. No one could see me up there and I would reach down and just tap them or run my fingers through their hair. It was amazing how freaked out people got. 11 years ago, I worked at a haunted house attraction. I started out in the corn maze dressed as a zombie, but that was super boring. My friend's spot was inside the haunted house dragging a cable across a metal chain link fence that would shoot out sparks. He let me know that I could just come hang out with him, and scare people near him. Well, I took his advice literally, and would hang from the rafters by my arms in the middle of the hallway the guests had to walk past. I would wait until half the group would go past me. Most just assumed I was another prop, since there were multiple fake bodies in the house. Well, at least once a night, I would get groped, half the time by guys trying to show their scared girlfriends that I wasn't real. I got more action there than I did in all of high school. A late comment, but last year I was a zombie for an immersive theater event in London. I'm also a qualified nurse. Due to this, the stage management would often call me if there was an injury with the actors, zombies or punters. I suppose my favorite was one night having to help a lady who had fractured/sprained her ankle whilst running from the horde during the show, whilst still in full zombie silicone and alcohol paints, plus a bloodied straitjacket. After the initial shock, I think it helped calm her nerves in an odd way. Certainly gave her a good story to tell when she got back home. We received an email from her a few weeks later thanking me and the stage management. I still have that printed out. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.